She was found on the morning of the fourth day, lying silently beside a burnt-out campfire, her skin sunburned, her lips cracked, but her eyes wide open, as if she had just awakened from an unreal dream. The rescue team, who had already prepared themselves for the discovery of a body, after more than 3 days missing in the Nevada desert, were completely stunned. She was alive. She hadn't lost any blood, no bite marks, no signs of attack by any wild animal. Around her, dozens of animal tracks were clearly imprinted in the sand. They weren't scattered like random prints, but arranged in a circle, as if an invisible boundary had been drawn between the human and the wild. When one of the rescuers bent down to examine the ground, he slowly murmured, his voice hoarse with disbelief. "Coyote. These are the tracks of a pack of coyotes." At that moment, the entire team froze. Coyotes, iconic creatures of the wild American West, often seen as dangerous, cunning, even ruthless. But this time, they hadn't attacked. On the contrary, the evidence suggested that the pack had returned night after night, lying just a few meters away from the woman, as if guarding her. The press dubbed it the Nevada Miracle. Social media exploded with a swarm of theories, from indigenous spiritual beliefs to suggestions that the woman emitted a scent that kept predators away. But it was her own account, fragmented, dreamlike, as if caught between realms of reality and myth, that truly chilled the world. "I thought I died on the second night," she said. "But then I woke up and saw a coyote sitting across from me. It didn't bark, it didn't growl, it just watched." A question now lingers, unanswered. Why would a pack of coyotes in the middle of the desert choose not to kill, but to save a human being? The Nevada, or Arizona, desert in the summer is not a place for the faint of heart. The sunlight here isn't just bright, it presses on the air like an invisible blanket weighing down the earth. Everything seems still. No wind, no clouds, no sound. Only the wind hissing through dried cactus shrubs and cracked earth, like the final breath of something once alive, crying out for a 1,000-year thirst never quenched. The sun hangs in the sky like a burning eye, casting its searing gaze on every grain of sand beneath the traveler's feet. Temperatures soar past 45 degrees Celsius by noon, blistering skin in a matter of hours. Every step on the sand drains energy. Every movement must be calculated, because dehydration here isn't just a risk. It's death, counting down with every passing second. And in this brutal landscape, Maria's story begins. She was a 34-year-old independent documentary filmmaker, known for her work in remote corners of the world, from the Amazon to West Africa, even the Sahara Desert, where she once filmed a project on climate change. A petite woman with curly chestnut hair and deep brown eyes. Eyes that seemed to listen to the stories of earth, sky, and wind. People said Maria had a certain intuition, as if she could communicate with nature in a silent language. But this time, nature was too harsh. And for the first time in her life, Maria got lost. Lost in the very footsteps she once trusted. Her rented SUV from the small town of Ely, Nevada, broke down in the late afternoon. No cell signal, no gas station, no humans, only a stretch of sand unfolding endlessly before her. And in her mind, only one thought: find help before night falls. She pulled out a paper map, outdated and frayed, and decided to walk southwest, believing she had briefly seen a flicker of signal on her phone hours earlier. She carried a small backpack. Inside was a nearly empty 1-liter water bottle, an energy bar, a compact video camera, her field notebook, and a silver bracelet. Not a valuable item. She had bought it from a stall in a Hopi marketplace weeks earlier. The bracelet was engraved with the image of a howling coyote. The woman who sold it, a blind elder, had said, "Wear this when you walk into the wild. It will protect you. Coyote knows who wanders from curiosity and who invades with harm." Maria had laughed, thinking it was just a bit of folklore, but she wore it anyway, maybe out of superstition, or maybe because the bracelet carried the breath of something ancient and primal. She walked for the first 3 hours, but found nothing but sun, sand, and stone. Her water dwindled. As night began to fall, she set up a crude shelter using a piece of tarp from her bag, covering her head, burying her legs in sand to retain warmth. That first night, the desert turned cold quickly. She curled up, shivering between hunger and fear. Strange sounds echoed in the distance, half howls, half whispers. She didn't dare sleep. The next morning, she continued walking, her eyes swollen from the sun, lips bleeding from dryness. Nature was testing her, grinding her down, breaking every shred of will. But she walked on, perhaps driven by instinct or by a fragile hope that someone or something was nearby. And indeed, something was. That second night, when Maria decided to stop and rest again, she heard a rustle. Close, deliberate. Through the murky darkness, 2 glowing golden eyes appeared. A coyote, lean, agile, stood only a few meters from her. It didn't growl, didn't bark, didn't approach. It just stood there, watching. Maria clutched her backpack to her chest, heart pounding, but the creature didn't move. It sat down, rested its head on its front paws, and remained. Like a silent stranger, uninvited but not threatening. She assumed it was a hallucination, born of thirst and exhaustion, but the next morning as dawn broke, she saw them, clear footprints in the sand. Arched, clawed. Not just one, many. A pack of coyotes. From that moment on, she was no longer alone. And the desert, once a realm of cruelty, transformed into something strange, almost sacred. A place suspended between life and death, between the human and the wild, where a hidden connection pulsed. One that no logic could ever explain. Day 1. Exhaustion, silence, and the desert night. The blazing red sun was slowly sinking behind the jagged dunes when Maria finally stopped. Her blistered feet trembled beneath her, and her body felt drained, every last ounce of strength wrung out by the desert. No more water, no sense of direction, no one left to call. She pulled a plastic tarp from her backpack and spread it over a patch of flat ground, weighing down the corners with small stones so it wouldn't be swept away by the wind. A makeshift bed. She collapsed onto it, her eyes half closed. But sleep didn't come. The desert night is unlike any other, not silent, but full of strange, disquieting sounds. The wind howled through rocky crevices like ancient spirits mourning something long lost. Maria heard rustling in the distance, sometimes near, sometimes far, sometimes so close it felt like it was whispering in her ear. Soft, steady footsteps pressing into the sand. Once, then again. She didn't dare open her eyes. She clutched her backpack to her chest like a child holding onto a blanket in a nightmare. It wasn't until dawn began to break that she drifted into a fitful sleep, her body surrendering to exhaustion. That was the first time in Maria's life she understood what true loneliness felt like, not just in her soul, but in every single cell of her being. Day 2, Eyes in the Darkness. Maria woke with cracked lips and a throat that burned like fire. The sun was only halfway to its peak, but the heat already felt like it could scorch her fragile skin to ash. She staggered a few hundred meters farther, disoriented and lightheaded from dehydration, then decided to turn back to her previous spot, afraid that if she went on, she might only wander deeper into nowhere. Night fell earlier than she expected. Fire, the only thing she could still create, was lit using a piece of plastic from her backpack and the battery from her wristwatch. She fed it with the last bits of dry tinder she had managed to save, keeping a small flickering flame alive. That was when it appeared. A coyote, tall, lean with fur the color of ash and desert gold, emerged from the dark. Its eyes glowed in the firelight, bright gold and calm. Not afraid, not aggressive. Maria panicked, quickly grabbing a nearby stone and hurling it toward the animal. The rock landed just a hand's width from its feet. It didn't flinch. Instead of snarling or retreating, the creature tilted its head, staring at Maria as though it were studying something strange and fragile. It didn't approach. It didn't flee. It just stood there, silent and still. Then, after what felt like an eternity, it backed away a few steps and lay down. Maria froze. She didn't know what to do, so she did nothing. Just sat there, staring back. The fire flickered between them, a woman and a wild beast, neither understanding what exactly was unfolding between them. The next morning, as sunlight brushed her face, she looked around and realized coyote tracks surrounded the spot where she had slept, a perfect circle, as if someone, or something, had patrolled around her through the night. Day 3, the nameless night watchers. Maria no longer had the strength to go far. She was so weak that she could only drag herself a few steps before collapsing back into the sand. The wind had shifted, blowing grit into her face, forcing her to wrap the tarp around her head. She hadn't eaten since the morning of the first day. Only a few drops of water remained at the bottom of her bottle, which she desperately tried to sip. Her mind was spinning, her voice so hoarse it could barely make a sound. Evening fell, and then they came. Not one, but 5 or 6 coyotes. They emerged from different directions, moving slowly, silently. Maria lay still, convinced this was the end. But there was no attack, no growling, no lunging. They came closer and sat down. Each one settled about 5 to 10 meters away. Close enough to watch her, but not close enough to threaten. One of them, likely the alpha, lay down gently, resting its head on its paws, its eyes never leaving Maria. She wept, not from fear, but from a strange, overwhelming feeling. Comfort. She didn't know if she was alive or in some final hallucination before death. But these creatures, instead of behaving like predators, seemed more like night watchmen, silently soothing a lost soul. That night, for the first time, she slept. Day 4. Smoke, rescue, and a message from the desert. Early morning. The wind began to carry strange echoes, not the howls of wild animals anymore, but something mechanical, a helicopter. In the distance, a dark speck slowly emerged against the vast blue sky. Maria struggled to her feet, using a small mirror from her toolkit to reflect sunlight in an attempt to send an SOS signal, but she couldn't be sure they saw it. In a moment of desperation, she remembered how to make fire using her watch battery. She took the plastic cap from a bottle, removed the battery, and connected it with a piece of foil to spark a flame. The strong wind made it difficult, but at last, a thin column of smoke rose, ashen gray, trembling in the midday air. That trail of smoke was what led the rescue team to her. As the helicopter touched down a few dozen meters away, its engine roared and kicked up a storm of sand. just as one team member stepped out, the pack of coyotes stood up. They didn't panic. They didn't scatter like frightened beasts. One by one, they turned away, as if their duty had been fulfilled. The alpha looked at Maria one final time, and then the whole pack quietly vanished into the shimmering heat of the desert. The first rescuer to approach Maria stopped in his tracks. He knelt, staring at the ground. These are coyote tracks. The entire area around where she had been lying was covered in a maze of paw prints, but there were no signs of blood, no bite marks, no indication of threat. Maria was placed on a stretcher, given water and oxygen immediately. She whispered just one sentence: "They didn't let me die." In the weeks that followed, the story spread across social media and the press. Some called it a miracle of nature. Others dismissed it as a hallucination brought on by dehydration. But wildlife biologists couldn't explain why a pack of coyotes, typically solitary, wild predators, had behaved as if they were watching over a human being. As for Maria, when asked, she only gave a faint smile. "I don't think I survived. I think they kept me." She still wore the silver bracelet engraved with a howling coyote, and since the day she returned, she had never taken it off, as if it were a tether binding her to the wild spirits out there, where sand, wind, and legend still whisper truths that humans have never fully understood. Not long after Maria was rescued, the media flocked to a small town near where she had gone missing, a place few had ever heard of, where stories live longer than maps or cell towers. There, amid the frenzy of headlines and the skepticism of rational minds, whispers began to surface, whispers that carried the breath of ancient legend. The local indigenous people, especially the Hopi and Navajo, were not surprised. To them, the coyote is not just a wild animal. It is the spirit of the desert, both a trickster and a guide. In their mythology, the coyote is a dual being. It can lead humans into trials, but it can also lead them out of darkness, if they are worthy. "She was chosen," said an elderly woman from a Hopi village through an interpreter, her eyes distant, as if seeing something just beyond human vision. "No one survives the fire and sand unless the coyote allows it." The silver bracelet Maria wore, a small trinket she had purchased at a local market before her journey, suddenly became a focal point of attention. The artisan who made it, an old man nicknamed Wind-Touched Hands, had gone missing over a year earlier after walking into the desert to find his lost son. No one ever saw him again. Some say he no longer lives among humans, but has become part of the earth, the sand, and the very creatures that roam the night. "That bracelet isn't just jewelry," an elder whispered when shown a photo of it on the news. "It's a mark, a whisper from the coyote, that the one who wears it is not to be touched, someone to be listened to, not hunted." Maria heard all these things with a mix of wonder and doubt. But deep down, she knew she had felt something she couldn't name or explain, but that was as real as the sand beneath her. It was the feeling of lying in complete darkness, with nothing left to hold on to, and seeing those warm golden eyes watching her, not as prey, but as a fellow lost soul. Since her return, Maria was no longer the same person. She stopped making films about physical truth and began recording oral legends, collective dreams, and the things no machine could measure. She spent hours in small homes among indigenous communities, writing down stories of strange encounters, wandering spirits, and children saved by a lone coyote. And every time someone asked why she survived, she would only reply, softly, "Because I listened." The desert is not always death. It simply has no mercy for the arrogant. but for those who enter it with humility, bare, vulnerable, perhaps like Maria, they will hear a small voice on the wind and feel eyes upon them, not to harm, but to guard what's still alive inside. From the moment the helicopter lifted off from the desert, carrying Maria back to the world of paved roads, cell signal, and city lights, something inside her was no longer the same. She didn't speak much. She didn't try to explain. She didn't attempt to tell a strange story for recognition or sympathy, but in her eyes, there was always something that made people fall silent. Maria never returned to her old life. She left the apartment, once packed with filming gear and documentary scripts, sold most of her belongings, and withdrew into a quieter existence, living near indigenous communities in northern Arizona. No longer the woman racing deadlines and chasing shots. Now, she was a listener, a student of tradition. She studied indigenous languages. She transcribed stories that had never been written down. She spent hours by the fire, listening to an elder recount how a shadow of a coyote once led a child home from the desert in 1912. And she began to believe that some things only exist if we are quiet enough to hear them, still enough to see them. When the media came searching for a sensational story, Maria greeted them with a gentle smile, deep eyes, and just one sentence, repeated like a ritual. I don't know why I'm alive, but I know I wasn't alone. No journalist got anything more, no detailed recounting of desert nights, no vivid tales of paw prints or golden eyes in the dark. Some grew frustrated, thinking she was hiding the truth. Others believed her silence was the proof that the story couldn't be fake. Maria still wore the silver bracelet every day. Time had aged it, but the image of the howling coyote remained clear, head lifted, mouth open as if calling out into a silent wind. A few years later, Maria published a book. Not a novel, not a memoir, just a collection of oral stories from tribes who live near the desert, interwoven with her own notes on faith, survival, and the thin line between reality and dream. The book had a simple name, Not Alone in the Desert. There was no final chapter, only a single sentence italicized on the last page. When everything around you falls completely silent, listen. You might hear soft footsteps on the sand and know that someone is still watching over you.